Wait, I just realized, if I'm making a video game, I need to build levels. Well, if you've been tuning into my bi-weekly live streams lately, you will have seen me working on all that, and those are rather lengthy to catch up on. So instead, let's just go over all the eureka moments that I've gone through on this topic over the last month or two, shall we? The most important part of designing these levels, beyond the general dungeon layout that I've had for like half a year by now, is setting up a good workflow that allows me to have easy creative freedom while designing, but also doesn't result in a bunch of extra unnecessary work. And look, I know that usually in pro-level industry standard workflows, the very first thing that we should do is just make a block mesh. Literally just using simple blocks and simple shapes to create the interactive parts of the level that can be playtested, and then, once you're sure your level layouts are good, then you can start adding art assets. But you know, I'm a solo dev and a special little snowflake, and surely the tried and true battle-tested workflow that's been industry standard for a long time just wouldn't work for me, right? Surely I can get away with doing my level blockouts in such a way that they are art ready right away, right? Also keeping them easily adjustable, right? So I tried using Unreal's built-in modeling tools to create my levels with. That way I already have these meshes ready to go, with half-decent UVs to apply textures to, and that way the playtesters can get a general idea of the vibe of the dungeon too, not just purely the mechanical side of it. But it turns out that Unreal's modeling tools, while generally great in some regards, aren't really a suite meant to be used to do whole level design with. Go figure. So then I got the idea to try a workflow where I make the roughest of rough shapes inside Unreal, and then export that into Blender, adjust the mesh to the level design that I want in Blender, which is much more built out in terms of modeling tools and even a little bit of sculpting if and where needed. And then when that level is done, I re-import that mesh into Unreal and bam, you've got yourself a level. But since I'm making the materials largely in Unreal, every time I change something in Blender, the UVs get shifted around, as well as the changes that I made inside Unreal, such as changing what material goes into what slot, get reset to the default value, which makes for a better, but still not ideal workflow. Which, in the end, has gotten me to accept that maybe doing a very basic, purely mechanical block mesh first might be the best way to go about doing things after all. And if you don't want to be an idiot like me and waste all of your time, I can highly recommend today's sponsor, Skillshare. On Skillshare you can find countless different courses and almost endless content made by professionals to help teach you pretty much any skill that you want. So if you want to supplement just watching YouTube tutorials on game development and really want to hear a professional from the field talk about this subject, Skillshare can really help you out. With my link down below in the description, you can get your first month of Skillshare for free, so don't hesitate and start learning today. My first thought was that in a large productions, these steps are surely split up because it is different people, hell, whole different teams working on these different aspects of the game. You can make your level designers make a block mesh, and then once that is finished, you can bring in the artists to work on that finalized layout and make their art assets with. And since I was doing all that myself anyway, I figured I might be able to combine those two parts of the workflow to save time. But it turns out, it's not just that. Having to work on art-related things while designing the level itself ends up being very prohibitive to the actual level designing process. It's not as easy to just quickly try something out. And everything takes twice as long anyway, since we're worrying about a bunch of technical stuff as well as gameplay, which ends up, well, with both gameplay and art being subpar in the end. So we're doing more annoying work, hardly saving any time, and the end result is actually worse. And what's even more, when I eventually put this into playtesters' hands, I'm going to have to change things. And with this workflow, that would be a true nightmare. So, block meshes it is. Unreal has some built-in tools for block meshes, which frankly are pretty much all that you'll need. A collection of basic shapes that indeed do have horrible UVs, but as we discussed, having good UVs isn't the point. Matter of fact, the whole point of these kinds of tools is not to worry about that right now, since we're making actual static meshes to place here later on, as a whole separate process. But I got a tip from a friend to get a plugin in the Unreal Marketplace called, simply, Blockout Tools. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. It's pretty affordable, and for the most part offers just the same shapes as Unreal's own tools, but they are a little bit nicer to work with. They add things like gizmos that you can easily use to change the size of your blocks. They also add in some more options for some shapes like hollow cylinders or different types of stairs. All in all, it's by no means needed, and it lacks some features that Unreal's own blockout tools do have, like the ability to boolean one shape into another. So realistically, you'll probably want to use a combination of both. Anyway, then once we have our whole blockout ready, we can start to convert that into a static mesh, export that as an FBX and start modeling the proper static meshes with those exact same proportions in Blender, where we can start adding more art details and worrying about the technical things like material slots and UVs. But only once we are very sure that the level design is finalized, because we need to know that the dimensions that we're working with every piece of this level are here to stay, to prevent having to go back and redoing art assets. Making a change to your level, when using proper blockout tools, is pretty quick and easy. Making the change to an art asset, that you probably assumed would have been final, can range from being a bit of a pain to being near impossible, since a lot of art creation is done in a destructive workflow, meaning that your actions are final and not applied procedurally where you can go back and change things easily after the fact. Unless you're one of those weirdos who models all their art with only geometry nodes, which, if you are, ignore everything that I just said. Also, you want to talk? Is everything going well in your life? Because I think you should seek professional help. So that is where I stand right now, having pretty much finished the design work on my first version of my first dungeon that I've been working on. It's time to let a handful of people playtest this soon, make changes based on those tests, and then start doing the art for this part of my game. My plan right now is to finish up this dungeon as a whole, for the most part. I'm sure there will be changes that need to be made later on, like implementing sound systems, such as the music system, which at the moment is very placeholder, and adding in or swapping out some of the enemies that are in there right now with new ones when I have designed, modeled, animated and programmed all of those. But aside from all that, I want to get this dungeon finalized as pretty much game ready before moving on to the next dungeon, as a vertical slice of the entire game. Maybe with some side quests here and there of making some extra content to keep me from actually going insane. And then, once this dungeon is fully finished, all I have to do is do all that 5 more times. I'm going to be developing this game forever, aren't I? And a very big thank you to all of my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help out supporting the channel, there's a link down below in the description to the Patreon page. A huge thank you to my Cave Student tier supporters, Earl Monseval Erno, and my Cave Digger tier supporters, Sir J. Thomas,